the psychology of why we say yes. You mentioned wanting to really get into the psychology of persuasion quickly, understand those core ideas that, shape our choices every day.
Exactly. So our mission here is to pull out the really key insights, make these sometimes complex psychological ideas feel clear, relevant to you, and give you some practical stuff without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Okay, yeah. Let's unpack it. What grabbed me straight away was how the author didn't just, stay in a lab.
Right.
He went out there, spent years with what he calls compliance professionals, salespeople, fundraisers, advertisers.
People whose jobs depend on getting that yes.
Exactly. And that mix of the science, the studies, and the real-world stuff, it feels really solid.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how these professionals, just through trial and error, kind of figured out what works, and often it lines up perfectly with the academic psychology research.
It's like two sides finding the same truths.
Yeah, so you look at what's working out there, and then you dig into why it works. That gives you a much deeper picture.
Okay, so the book kicks off with this idea of automatic influence. He calls it click, whirr, like a switch flips.
That's a great way to put it. Think about animal behavior, those fixed action patterns. The classic one is the mother turkey.
Oh, right.
She hears that cheep, cheep sound, and boom, maternal instincts kick in, even if it's not a real chick making the sound.
Just the sound itself is the trigger.
Precisely. And the argument is we humans, we have our own versions of that, these mental shortcuts, these automatic responses that get triggered by specific cues.
Like the Xerox machine study he talks about? That one was eye-opening.
Oh, definitely. It shows how just one little word can make a huge difference. So people ask to cut in line.
Yeah.
If they give a real reason, like because I'm in a rush, most people say yes. About 94%, I think.
Okay, that makes sense.
But here's the amazing part. If they say, because I have to make some copies, which isn't really a reason at all, everyone's there to make copies.
Right.
Compliance was almost identical, like 93%. Just having the word because seemed to be enough. It triggered that automatic compliance.
Wow, so the structure of a reason, even without substance, just works.
It seems so. It taps into that deeply ingrained thing where we expect a reason for a request, a sort of politeness script, almost.
Makes you think how often we're just running on autopilot with these things.
Well, we kind of have to, don't we? Life's incredibly complex now. We need these rules of thumb, these shortcuts, just to get through the day without analyzing every single tiny decision.
True. You can't scrutinize everything.
But, as the because study shows, these shortcuts have a flip side.
Like the jewelry store example, with the turquoise jewelry.
Exactly. The vacationers, they didn't know much about turquoise. The owner accidentally doubles the price.
And suddenly it starts flying off the shelves.
Yeah, because for those buyers, the price itself became the trigger for quality. Expensive equals good. It's a common stereotype, a mental shortcut.
Especially when you don't have other information to go on.
Right, the higher price just flipped that quality switch for them. It wasn't about the jewelry itself, really.
So these helpful shortcuts, they also make us vulnerable.
That's the core idea. Just like predators in nature can mimic signals to fool their prey.
Like the firefly example he uses.
Right, mimicking mating signals. People who understand these automatic human responses can use them, mimic the triggers to influence us, often without us even noticing.
That's a bit unnerving.
It is. It really highlights why understanding these principles is so important, to be more aware.
Okay. And speaking of subtle influences, there's the contrast principle.
Ah, yes. This one's fascinating. How we perceive things really depends on what came just before.
The clothing store example nails this.
It does. Sell someone an expensive suit first, say $495.
Yeah.
Then a $95 sweater afterwards seems, well, almost cheap by comparison, doesn't it?
Totally. But if you saw the $95 sweater first, it might feel like a bigger purchase.
Exactly. And sales analysts noticed this ages ago. People who buy a suit often spend more on accessories like shirts or ties after the big purchase because those items seem less costly in contrast.
It's all relative, isn't it? Our brain isn't judging the price in isolation.
Our judgment is heavily shaped by context. And it's not just shopping. Remember that student's letter home?
Oh, God, that was brilliant. Darkly brilliant.
Oh,
Starts with the skull fracture, the dorm fire, all this terrible stuff.
And then tucked in at the end, oh, by the way, I'm failing chemistry.
Suddenly, failing chemistry seems like nothing.
It's pure contrast principle. Frame the bad news by putting something way worse first. It dramatically softens the blow.
Okay, so automatic triggers, contrast. What's next? Reciprocation. The give and take.
Yes, the rule of reciprocation. This is a cornerstone of human society, really. We feel this strong obligation to repay favors, gifts, invitations. whatever someone provides us.
Like that professor sending Christmas cards to total strangers.
Yeah. And getting a surprising number back from people who had absolutely no idea who he was, that feeling of obligation is almost automatic.
It feels like a fundamental social rule. You don't want to be seen as a taker.
Exactly. Society drills this into us. We have all these negative words: moocher, freeloader, ingrate for people who violate the rule. It keeps the wheels of social cooperation turning.
And that Reagan study, the one with the paintings and the raffle tickets,
Yeah,
that really showed the power.
it did. The key finding was that getting a small, unsolicited favor, like a Coke, doubled the number of raffle tickets people bought from the guy afterward.
Doubled.
Yeah. And interestingly, this effect was often stronger than whether they actually liked the person giving the favor. The sense of indebtedness trumped liking.
So even if you don't like someone, if they do you a small favor,
You feel obligated. Which explains why groups like the Hare Krishna Society found giving away flowers or books in airports so effective, even if people weren't initially receptive. That small gift created an obligation before they asked for a donation.
makes sense. You see it everywhere once you look. Politics too, right? Log rolling.
Oh, absolutely. Trading votes, supporting each other's projects. It's built on reciprocation. Businesses use it too. Think about free samples. Amway called it the buggy.
Giving away free product creates that little nudge of obligation.
It does. Even uninvited favors work. Those address labels charities send out.
Yeah, I get those.
They significantly boost donation rates because people feel they've received something and should give back. It's powerful. Even in extreme situations like that story of the German soldier in World War I.
The one who couldn't capture the enemy soldier.
Yes, because the enemy soldier had shared his bread with him earlier. That basic human act of giving created an obligation that overrode even his duty as a soldier in that moment.
Incredible. Okay, but there's a more strategic use too, isn't there? The rejection then retreat?
Ah, the door in the face technique, yes. This is where you start with a really big request, one you fully expect to be rejected. Then, after the rejection, you retreat to a smaller, more reasonable request, the one you actually wanted all along.
So the second request seems like a concession.
Exactly. The person feels like you've compromised, so they feel obligated to reciprocate your concession by agreeing to the smaller request. The classic Boy Scout example: will you buy these $5 circus tickets? No. Okay, well, how about one of these $1 candy bars?
And the candy bar seems much more reasonable after refusing the tickets. You feel like you should meet them halfway.
Precisely. And it's not just small stakes. The book floats the idea that even the Watergate break-in plan might have involved this. Liddy's initial outrageous $1 million plans were rejected.
Making the later $250,000 plan seem almost sensible in comparison.
It suggested it might have worked that way. Magruder himself said after hearing the $1 million pitch, the $250,000 seemed more acceptable. It's about framing.
That's quite a thought, that history could be shaped by these tactics.
And studies, like that UCLA bargaining one, show that people who agree after rejection then retreat feel more responsible for the final deal.
More responsible. Why?
Because they feel like they successfully negotiated the person down. They won a concession, which makes them more satisfied and more likely to stick to the agreement.
Sneaky. So how do you defend against reciprocation pressure, especially these tactics?
The key is to identify the initial act for what it is. Is it a genuine favor, or is it the first step in a compliance technique?
Like the free inspection from the alarm company.
Exactly. If you recognize that free gift or that initial large request as a tactic, you can accept it or reject it without triggering the feeling of obligation to comply with the next request. A favor deserves a favor, but a sales trick doesn't.
Redefine it in your head. Okay. Let's shift to commitment and consistency, our desire to stick with what we've said or done.
Right. This is a really strong internal driver. Once we take a stand, make a choice, or even just state an opinion, we feel this pressure, both internal and external, to behave consistently with that earlier commitment.
Like Sarah's story with Tim and the other guy.
Yeah. Even when her original reasons for choosing Tim might have weakened, the very act of having made that commitment, of choosing him, actually strengthened her feelings and resolve to make it work. Our actions shape our attitudes.
We justify our past choices to ourselves, like the transcendental meditation example. People invested time and money.
And that investment itself made them more committed. To admit they were wrong or that it wasn't working would create cognitive dissonance, an uncomfortable inconsistency.
Oh.
So belief strengthens to justify the past commitment.
It protects the previous decision.
And businesses know this. Think about the toy companies around Christmas.
Oh, they're deliberately undersupplying the hot toy.
Exactly. Parents promise the child that specific toy. Can't find it before Christmas. But the promise has been made. Commitment.
So come January or February.
The parents are back in the store, hunting for that toy to fulfill their promise. Even if the child's interest has waned, the company gets post-holiday sales based on that initial commitment.
Wow, that is kind of manipulative when you put it like that.
It leverages that consistency principle. The key is getting that initial commitment, taking a stand, going on record. That's what activates the pressure.
Like the tactics used in the Chinese POW camps during the Korean War. That was a really sobering example.
Incredibly sophisticated psychological tactics. They didn't use much physical coercion. Instead, they focused on getting prisoners to make very small, seemingly insignificant anti-American or pro-communist statements, maybe in an essay contest for a small prize.
Just a tiny crack.
Right, but then they publicize it. Look, Joe wrote this. Getting them to inform on minor rule breaking, then labeling them collaborators. Writing things down was especially powerful.
Why writing?
Because a written statement feels more concrete, more deliberate. It's physical evidence of your stance. It makes it harder to deny or rationalize away later. It changes your self-image.
Which links to the foot in the door technique.
Precisely. Get someone to agree to a small initial request, and they become much more likely to agree to a larger related request later.
Like the Billboard study. Signing a small petition first.
About keeping California beautiful, or driver safety, made people vastly more likely later to agree to put a huge, ugly drive carefully sign on their front lawn.
That's a massive jump.
Because that small initial act of signing the petition subtly changed how they saw themselves. I'm the kind of person who supports this cause. Then refusing the big sign would be inconsistent with that new self-image.
And making commitments public makes them even stronger, right?
Definitely. Announcing your intention to quit smoking or lose weight publicly makes you much more likely to stick to it because your reputation is now tied to that commitment.
We want to look consistent to others. What about effort? Does that play a role?
A huge role. Things that are harder to achieve are often valued more. Think about intense fraternity initiations, Hell Week, or grueling military boot camps.
They're incredibly difficult.
But that very difficulty increases the commitment of those who get through it. They've invested so much effort, the group and its values become much more important to them. It builds solidarity. We went through this together.
But the commitment has to feel voluntary, right? Like it came from within.
Absolutely crucial. The book calls it inner responsibility. If you only comply because of a big reward or strong threat, the commitment doesn't really stick internally.
Like Friedman's robot study with the kids.
Exactly. A mild threat, it's wrong to play with that robot, was more effective in the long run at stopping kids from playing with the forbidden toy than a severe threat. If you play with it, I'll be very angry and have to do something.
Why would a milder threat work better?
Because the severe threat provides an obvious external reason for not playing. The child thinks, I'm not playing because I'll get punished. With the mild threat, the external justification is weaker, so the child is more likely to internalize the reason. I'm not playing because I don't want to, or because it's wrong. They take inner responsibility.
So for lasting change, like in parenting, you need reasons that are just strong enough, but not overpowering.
That's the idea. Foster internal change, not just temporary compliance due to external pressure.
Okay, and then there's that really frustrating tactic, the lowball.
Ugh, yes. So common in car sales, but elsewhere too. They offer you a fantastic deal, an unbeatable price.
Get you hooked, maybe sign some initial papers.
You commit to buying the car at that great price. You start mentally owning it, maybe even tell people about it. Then, oops.
Yeah, the oops.
Oh, the manager didn't approve that discount, or I forgot to add the cost of the air conditioning, or the trade-in value wasn't quite as high. The initial advantage is removed or reduced.
But by then you're already committed.
Exactly. And you've started building all these new reasons in your head for why you want this specific car. So even though the original great deal is gone, people often still go through with the purchase because backing out now would feel inconsistent and they've already mentally adjusted.
Like the commitment grows its own legs.
It really does.
Yeah.
So how do you fight consistency pressure, especially when it feels wrong? Listen to your gut, that little pang in your stomach when you feel you're being pushed into something you don't really want, just to be consistent. Recognize it. And ask yourself, knowing what I know now, would I make the same commitment again?
Separate the initial decision from the current one.
And remember, Emerson, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. It's okay to change your mind if the situation changes or you realize you are manipulated.
Good advice. Okay, principle number 4, social proof. This is huge. We look to others to figure out how to act.
Immensely powerful. The basic idea is, if lots of other people are doing something, we assume it must be the right thing to do, especially when we're uncertain.
Like canned laughter on TV shows. Most people say they hate it.
But producers use it because experiments show it works. Hearing others laugh makes viewers perceive the material as funnier and laugh more themselves. It provides social proof that this is funny.
Advertisers use it constantly. Fastest growing, largest selling.
They don't even need to prove the product is good. Just saying lots of people are buying it is often enough proof for us. It implies quality or desirability.
Like nightclubs creating fake lines outside.
Or bartenders salting their tip jars with a few bills at the start of the night. Or charity telethons listing donor names, all creating the appearance that others are participating, donating, finding this place desirable.
It taps into that follower instinct. Kevin Roberts quote.
Right. Since 95% of the people are imitators and only 5% initiators, people are persuaded more by the actions of others than by any proof we can offer.
It's kind of humbling, isn't it? How much we rely on the herd.
It is. And sometimes it leads to really strange outcomes, like that doomsday cult example.
Oh, Marion Keech's group, when the spaceship didn't arrive.
You'd expect them to abandon their beliefs, right? But instead, faced with that undeniable disproof, they did the opposite. They became more fervent, started actively trying to recruit new members for the first time.
Why? That seems completely illogical.
Because the physical proof had failed. So the only way to sustain their belief, to reduce the crushing dissonance, was to seek social proof. If they could persuade others that their beliefs were correct, maybe they weren't crazy after all. They needed validation from others.
Wow. The need for social proof can be incredibly strong, overriding even direct evidence.
It can, and it explains some really troubling phenomena, like the bystander effect.
The Catherine Genovese case is the classic tragic example. Attacked repeatedly, many people heard or saw something, but nobody effectively intervened for a long time.
And the shocking thing researchers discovered is that the more bystanders there are, the less likely any single one is to help.
That seems so backwards. Why?
2 main reasons. First, diffusion of responsibility. When many people are present, everyone assumes someone else will call the police or take action. Personal responsibility gets diluted.
Someone else must be doing something.
Exactly. Second, pluralistic ignorance. In ambiguous situations, and emergencies often are, initially we look to others to see how they're reacting. If everyone is looking around, trying to seem calm, and nobody else is acting concerned,
Then everyone assumes it must not be a real emergency.
right. Everyone interprets the lack of public reaction from others as proof that intervention isn't needed. It's a vicious cycle of inaction, fed by social proof.
So counterintuitively, you might be better off if only one person witnesses your emergency.
Research suggests so. That one person knows the responsibility rests solely on them. So if you are in an emergency with multiple bystanders, what should you do?
You need to break through that ambiguity and diffusion.
Precisely. Don't just shout, "Help!" Reduce uncertainty. Yell, "This is an emergency, I need help." Then, crucially, assign specific responsibility. Point to one person. You in the blue shirt. Call 911 now.
Make it direct and specific. Takes away the ambiguity and the diffusion.
Exactly. Now, social proof works best under 2 conditions: uncertainty, which we've discussed, and similarity.
Similarity, meaning we're more influenced by people like us.
Yes. We're more inclined to follow the lead of people we perceive as similar to ourselves. That's why average person testimonials and ads can be so effective.
Like the lost wallet study.
Right. People were more likely to return a lost wallet if the letter inside, supposedly from a previous finder, indicated that person was similar to them. IGD spoke similar English.
Or your own story about your son learning to swim.
Yeah. He wasn't getting it from my instructions, but then he saw another little boy his age, Tommy, just doing it. And suddenly he was willing to try. Seeing someone like him succeed was the key social proof he needed.
That makes sense. But relying only on social proof, especially from similar others, can be dangerous, right? If the herd is wrong.
Absolutely. Think about buffalo stampedes heading off a cliff, or potentially situations in aviation where a flight crew might misinterpret something because everyone else seems calm. Or even everyday things, like that patrolman's story.
About drivers blindly following each other into a lane that was actually closed, causing accidents.
Yeah. People see others changing lanes, assume they know something, and follow without checking for themselves. Relying only on social proof can lead you astray.
And manipulators can create fake social proof.
Definitely. Salting tip jars, using claques in opera houses to stimulate applause, even generating fake online reviews. Anything that creates the illusion that lots of other people approve or are participating. The horse racing betting ring is another example of exploiting this.
Okay, next principle. Liking. Pretty straightforward. We prefer to say yes to people we know and like.
Seems obvious, but the factors that cause liking are interesting and can be manipulated. Physical attractiveness is a big one.
Really? It makes that much difference.
Studies show attractive people get more help, are seen as more talented, kind, honest, intelligent. It creates a halo effect. They're also more persuasive.
Wow. Okay. What else creates liking?
Similarity. We like people who are like us. Shared opinions, personality traits, background, lifestyle, even similar names or clothes can help.
Like the insurance salespeople who did better when they matched the client's age, religion, politics, or smoking habits.
Exactly. And good salespeople often try to find or even fabricate similarities. The technique of mirroring and matching a customer's posture, mood, and speech patterns taps into this.
Subtly making yourself seem more like them. What about compliments?
We love them. Even when we suspect they might not be entirely sincere, compliments tend to increase our liking for the person giving them.
Like Joe Girard, the car salesman, sending out those I like you cards every month.
Seemed cheesy, but it worked. People responded positively. Familiarity through contact also helps, generally, if the contact is positive, but cooperation is even more powerful.
The Robbers Cave experiment, with the two groups of boys, the Eagles and the Rattlers.
Classic study. Putting the groups in competition created instant hostility. They hated each other. Standard team-building stuff didn't work.
So it did.
Introducing problems that affected both groups and required them to cooperate to solve. Superordinate goals, fixing the camp's water supply, pooling money to rent a movie, pulling a stuck truck.
Working together towards a common goal broke down the hostility.
Dramatically, cooperation forced them to see each other as allies, not enemies. It built liking. That's why cooperative learning strategies in schools can be so effective.
And finally, association, linking yourself or your product to positive things.
Yes. We like things associated with good things, dislike things associated with bad things. It's why advertisers use celebrities or link products to desirable images.
And why poor weather forecasters get blamed for bad weather.
Exactly. Guilt by association. The flip side is glory by association. Sports fans are a prime example.
Saying we won, but they lost.
Precisely. That study at Arizona State University showed students were much more likely to wear school apparel after a football victory. They want to bask in the reflected glory, associate themselves with success.
Okay, so if someone we like is trying to sell us something, how do we resist?
Mentally separate the requester from the request. Make your decision based on the merits of the deal itself, not on how much you like the person offering it. Ask yourself, would I buy this if someone I didn't like was selling it?
Focus on the thing, not the person. Got it. Next, authority. The power of obeying perceived experts or figures of authority.
This one's deeply ingrained. The Milgram experiments are the most famous and frankly disturbing illustration.
Where ordinary people administered what they thought were painful electric shocks just because an authority figure in a lab coat told them to.
Yes. The levels of obedience were shockingly high. It showed how powerful the pressure to obey legitimate authority can be, even when it conflicts with our own conscience.
And often it's not even real authority, just the symbols of authority that trigger that click were obedience.
Exactly. We often react to the symbols rather than the substance. Titles are a big one. Just adding professor before someone's name makes people perceive them as taller and listen more respectfully.
Or using an actor who played a doctor on TV to sell Sanka coffee.
Robert Young. People transferred the perceived authority of his TV character to the actual product. Clothing is another powerful symbol.
Like the study where nurses obeyed dangerous instructions over the phone from someone they'd never met, just because he identified himself as doctor.
A chilling example. Or the study where pedestrians were more likely to follow a jaywalker against the light if the jaywalker was wearing a business suit versus casual clothes. The suit symbolized authority.
And other trappings of authority. Expensive cars, fancy jewelry.
Yes, they can signal status and authority, making people more deferential. Con artists often use these trappings, like the bank examiner scam.
So how do we protect ourselves from being unduly influenced by authority? Or just the symbols?
Two key questions to ask. First, is this authority truly an expert? Do they have real credentials and knowledge relevant to this specific topic?
Not just general authority, but expertise in this area.
Right. Second, how truthful can we expect this expert to be here? Do they have anything to gain by persuading us? Are they likely to be biased?
Consider their motives.
Exactly. Sometimes experts might subtly distort information to serve their own interests, like the waiter who seems to argue against his interest.
Recommending a slightly cheaper dish.
Yeah, that can be a tactic to build trust. By making a small concession, they appear honest, making you more likely to trust their later, perhaps more expensive, recommendations for wine or dessert.
Clever. Okay, last principle. Scarcity. The rule of the few. Things seem more valuable when they're less available.
A very powerful motivator. We just seem to want things more when we think we can't have them, or when they're running out.
Like the Mormon temple example, when non-members had only a very limited time to tour it.
Interest went way up. Creating that limited window made the opportunity seem much more valuable. Salespeople use this constantly.
The limited number tactic. Only a few left in stock.
Or the deadline tactic. Sale ends today. This price is only good right now. It forces a quick decision by creating pressure around availability.
Like the appliance store guy saying that's the last one, or pretending to check the back room.
Or the door-to-door salesperson saying they're only in the neighborhood for one day. Or the portrait company threatening to burn unsold photos. All creating artificial scarcity.
Why is scarcity so powerful?
Partly because we use availability as a shortcut for quality. Things that are rare or hard to get are often assumed to be better. But there's also psychological reactance. It's our desire to preserve our freedoms. When something becomes less available, our freedom to have it is restricted, and we react against that restriction by wanting it even more.
As a toddler who suddenly wants the toy they ignored just because another kid picked it up.
Exactly. Reactance kicks in around age 2. The terrible twos are partly about asserting freedom. The Romeo and Juliet effect is another example.
Parental opposition making the romance seem even more desirable.
Often, yes. Trying to ban something can make it more appealing due to reactance. Think about censorship. Banned books or movies often gain cachet.
Like that jury study where telling jurors to disregard evidence about insurance actually made them award higher damages.
Right. The restricted information became more valuable, more salient in their minds. Exclusive information is also more persuasive.
The beef importer study, where telling wholesalers that the supply information was exclusive made them buy much more.
Yeah. Scarcity of the information itself made the beef seem more valuable.
And scarcity seems most powerful when something has recently become scarce, right?
Yes, more so than things that have always been scarce. Worrell's cookie study showed this beautifully.
People wanted the cookies more when they went from a jar of 10 down to 2, compared to if there were only 2 to begin with.
Exactly. Newly experienced scarcity is more potent. This might even relate to social unrest. Revolutions often happen not when conditions are worst, but when a period of improvement is followed by a reversal, threatening newly gained freedoms.
Like losing something you just got feels worse than never having had it.
Precisely. Erratic parenting, where freedoms are given and then taken away, can also trigger strong reactance for this reason.
And the real estate tactic of scheduling multiple buyers to see a house at the same time.
The stacked deck creates visible competition and scarcity, making buyers feel urgent pressure to make an offer before someone else snaps it up.
Okay, so scarcity is everywhere. How do we resist it without missing out on genuinely good opportunities?
Recognize the emotional rush that scarcity triggers, that heightened desire, maybe anxiety. Use it as a cue to stop and think, calm down. Then ask yourself why you want the item.
Is it for its actual function or usefulness? Or just because it's rare or unavailable?
Exactly. Do you want the cookie because it tastes good or just because there are only 2 left? If you want it primarily for its utility, its rarity doesn't make it function any better. Separate the desire caused by scarcity from the actual merit of the item.
That's a great way to think about it. Wow. Okay, this has been a really comprehensive look at these core principles from the psychology of persuasion.
It really covers the main pillars: reciprocation, commitment and consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity. Understanding these gives you, well, a kind of superpower in seeing how influence works.
And for you, listening, wanting that quick but thorough grasp, hopefully this deep dive delivered that. It gives you a framework, a shortcut really, to understanding these forces that are constantly shaping our decisions, often without us realizing it.
And that's the key takeaway, isn't it? So much of this operates automatically, under the surface. Just being aware of these principles, recognizing when they might be influencing you or when others might be using them, that's the first step to making more conscious choices.
So as you go about your week, maybe start noticing these things. See them in ads, in negotiations, in social media, even in your own behavior. Which ones jump out at you most?
Yeah, which ones feel most surprising or which do you encounter most often? It's fascinating once you start looking. And of course, this is just scratching the surface. There's always more to learn about how persuasion works.
Definitely food for thought. Maybe even consider which ones you use yourself, consciously or unconsciously. Something to mull over.